I've said we are going to be discussing composition, and you're probably wondering why I have some photographs and some colored pieces of paper on my desk. And that is because I'm going to discuss two things. Firstly, it is much easier, obviously, to paint a picture from a photograph because it is already in the two-dimensional format. So, in other words, when you are drawing from real life and you have, for example, this jar of paint sitting in front of you, which to you guys will have a really round top, but if I put it in front of me, I'm going to be seeing it like this. So this becomes an ellipse, and I can see the details and shaping of the bottle. And the thing with drawing from 3D in real life, as you look up and down between your paper, canvas, whatever it is that you're working on, and your object, your head and eye level often change all the time. As you get tired, you might slouch. You might start off kind of hunched over, and then you might relax back in your chair. So when you are drawing from real life, you have to remember to keep viewing your object from the same position, because sometimes you can start drawing, say you've got a group of things. For example, you've got your jar of paint, your bottle of water, and I'm looking for something on my desk that's a different shape, and an ink pad. And you've set this up as a little composition that you are going to draw. Again, you are seeing it straight down, so you're seeing very round and square shapes. From where I'm viewing it from this angle, everything is at a different perspective. So when you start drawing, you might see quite a lot of the top of this object, and then as you get tired and you perhaps lean on your desk, your angle changes. So that's why sometimes your drawings from real life can go a little skew, cockeyed, weird, whatever. So if you have already taken a photograph of your objects, and in this case I've got 3 lemons, a vase of flowers, that is already done for you. So your camera has flattened out everything into a two-dimensional plane. So you don't have that problem of now moving your head so that the perspective of the vase changes. So I suggest, if you're going to start drawing, it is easier to work from an existing image, be it one from a magazine, newspaper, a photograph you've taken. So work between the two. I'm not saying only do this, but for exercise purpose, it is quite good to draw a grid on your picture. I often don't actually draw a grid. My printer prints bang in the middle of the page. So what I do is I actually just fold it in half again, and then I can see that my printed image is to there, and I just fold it in half that way. So I'm folding up to the top of that image because I can just see the ink through the page, and then I'm going to do it again going this way. So I have, when I undo it, a whole lot of soft squares in the background because I don't want pencil grids. That's my personal preference. You can sit, and if you want to, if you're finding that that is not enough, what I would do is draw pencil grid over the top. So this isn't a square, in other words. So these blocks are not square, and this is something that I discovered when I was working with one of my students who was wanting to go from a little tiny picture to a massive canvas. The canvas was like 1 meter by 1.30 meters. It was huge, and her canvas wasn't the same size in enlargement. So her canvas was slightly squarer than her original image was. So what happened when she drew up her blocks on here, so she did this, and so she divided it in the quarters, and then she broke those, each one of those, into quarters again. When she took her canvas, so if I take this, it's going to be almost to the same size as this. So if I had to fold this piece of paper up and so on, I would land up with very similar size blocks. But what she didn't account for is the fact that her canvas was a different shape. So her blocks landed up being almost square on her canvas, and she was now trying to fit an oblong size piece of object into a squarer piece of canvas. So her whole picture got a little bit distorted, and she couldn't quite work out why. And then I said, did you do the maths? Which, as an artist, come on, let's face it, my maths is tricky at the best of times. Basic maths I can do, but yes, so you have to actually do the maths. So in that case, what I suggest is, if your canvas is not the same size as your image, work in what I call true square grid. In other words, divide your canvas into proper squares. You will then land up with a funny edge on one or other side, and break this up into proper centimeter or inch grid, because then you will be doing a true transfer from the one to the other. Does that make sense? So yes, it's all very well to use these techniques to help you, but if you are copying it onto a completely different format, it is not going to help you at all. It's going to result in a strange contortion of your original object. So that is one way to get your images across. And then, so I'm discussing composition. And one of the things I do is, again, this my sister-in-law will recognize when she has the time to watch this video. I take photographs. I used to have my camera wherever I went. I was known for having my camera. Now, of course, we all have a camera in our phone. When I took these photographs, it was long before cell phones had fancy cameras. In fact, I don't think my phone had a camera at all at this stage. So I always had, in fact, this is one of my original cameras, just one of these little pocket cameras that I always used to carry with me if I didn't have my big Canon with me. So this literally was in my pocket. I'm not much of a handbag girl. And so I would see something and I would take a photograph of it, but I wouldn't just take a photograph of it, because a camera can distort things. And also a camera gives you the chance to play with composition. So you can see with this shot that I have got a bigger zoomed out version of the same subject matter. And here again, you will have heard me if you've been following this series of doing art on Thursdays and Fridays. When you work with objects in an image, if you can arrange it, that is. So this is a still life, so I have the ability to arrange it. It's not like a landscape painting. You can't move the tree and the house and everything to suit you. You can do that later in your painting, but when you're taking the photograph, sometimes I take landscape pictures just for reference, and I move my trees and houses about. So here I've got my 3 lemons, so I'm looking for my odd numbers. Odd numbers are always more comfortable in an image than even numbers. And I have got my vase off center, so that being my center line, I know because I've just folded it in half. And I could have taken or put in more or less of the same, because these are just flowers from my sister-in-law's garden, daisies, and I'm not even sure what this is. I think it could have been a rose. Yes, those are roses. And so I would like, when I'm painting, to have odd numbers of things. So you could have, like, I've got 3 very definite daisies going on, but there's 4, 5. So there's 5 white ones, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 It's just coincidental, actually, that there are 5. But if I know my sister-in-law, she probably set it up intentionally like that. But there's some other flowers on the other side, which you can see in this picture, because I've taken this photograph here. I was also playing with the light. So the sun was just catching the bottom of this table. This was outside on the patio. And then I came around to the other side of the very same image or object, and I took a photograph from this side. And again, you can see I have cropped things. So you don't have to do what I did in these 2 photographs, in fact 3 photographs, where I have got the whole object. These are reference photographs that I've taken of vases of flowers over the years. This one is a good 30 years old, because I know this was taken in my backyard back in Bergfleet as a teenager. So then this one was a vase of flowers that I had at home, and I set it up on just a white sheet, which I crunched on purpose to be able to get some shadows and things happening. And then I scratched through my fabric pile, and I've got some denim hanging at the back, which I've draped over something so that my flowers pop out. So I've intentionally set this picture up with this background. It wasn't just like this one, which was in my flat with my oval little side table. And you'll notice that I've actually put the oval to one side, and I've balanced my great big vase of flowers. So my flowers might be central, but I've still got a little bit of interest going on and a little bit of balance happening over here. And again, I've got my flowers. Now some of these things are quite hard to arrange how you want to, and yeah, I've tried to create an interesting view of a whole lot of the flowers. And then I also did some close-ups. So I took some close-ups of like that bendy guy over there, and some, but I took these at night and I used flash. So flash has completely blown out any interesting shadows or anything, but I've still got the reference. And also, if you are printing photographs, so this one I've printed on my selfie printer, which you can't help, comes in shiny only. These are done in matte. I do prefer working with matte if I can get my photos printed, because there is less shine when you are working with them. Okay, so moving on to the same bowl of lemons. Here I've done a close-up, and here I've panned out, and I'm just playing with different angles of the shot. That's just a bigger print out of this one. So in a photograph, you are going to get far more, in a printed photograph, you're going to get far more detail and color than in a printer. So when you just do a printer, Canon, I've just got a, what is this, my brother. I've got a brother printer, and so a lot of the detail and depth is lost. So it's also important to know when you are working from your images that you work from a good quality image. Okay, so moving on to building your composition. And here I've got just some Daler-Rowney oil painting paper, which I've primed with just grey paint. And while we're talking about grey paint, I trained as a photographer. As part of my training as a graphic designer, we used to have 2 days of black and white photography darkroom work every week. And one of the things you learn when you are doing photography, especially in black and white, is that you have what's called a middle gray. If you research it, it's the number 5 gray. And so you have from the number 5 gray, then goes very lighter and lighter and lighter, and then it goes darker and darker and darker. So it is your tints and your tones of, so tints go lighter, tones go darker of your gray. And it is a warm gray because, again, you get different bases. So if we're talking about paint, you get lamp black, you get ivory black, You get different pigments. Yes, please. My husband's making coffee, for those of you who can hear it in the background. Come to fetch my cup. So when you are working with pigments, you have different colors. So some blacks have a lot of blue in them and go colder, and some blacks have a lot of brown in them and are warmer. So you need to be aware of that when you choose your black. Like for example, I have lamp black, and it's quite a nice neutral black. It's not too blue and it's not too brown. So I try and use, if I can, a neutral gray. And what we're going to do for exercise purposes, this is something that I learned in my graphic design days. If you take an oblong piece of paper and you fold it like so, and you grab a pair of scissors, and you cut off the excess, so you can do the same with a piece of fabric, you can do the same with whatever. This is how you get a square. I'm just working with a square, and I'm going to use this other one as another example of so. And I'm just for interest sake, I'm going to fold it the other way so I have my center point over here, and I'm just going to mark it because I don't think you guys can see it on screen. I'm going to use this as just a misprint, and I'm going to just fold this one so I also get my center point of my oblong, and mark that. And let's put this out of the way. Okay, let's pop this on. There we go. So I'm just going to show you for experimental purposes, using squares and rectangles and triangles and circles, compositional issues, because a lot of people forget that your background is also part of your composition. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pop these out of the way now, and I'm going to roll up my craft sheet so that I can get at my cutting mat underneath. There we go. Just put that there to hold everything, to stop it from popping back into screen. And I'm going to use, I've got just some black cardboard, some grey cardboard, and some lighter grey cardboard. You can, if you don't have different color cardboards, mix up different shades of grey for yourself and paint some pieces of cardboard or paper. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take a ruler and a craft knife, and you are going to cut yourself some different shapes. So I'm going to start off by cutting a square. Now I'm lucky in that I've got a grid on my mat here, and this has a metal edge. I'm going to cut myself a square out of this one, and it's 3 inches long. If you work in centimeters, work in centimeters. It's just my mat is in inches. And just for interest's sake, I'm going to cut myself the same size square out of the darker grey, and these are not perfect offcuts. I can see that one skew, but I'm just going to cut a 3-inch square here, and I'm going to do the same in the black. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I've got those 3. I'm going to just chop these off so I have them also as rectangles. I'm not even going to measure that. And I'm going to have a bigger black rectangle. So what I'm looking for is just a bunch of shapes at this stage in square, rectangle. Now I'm going to cut some triangles. So I'm going to cut a triangle like so. And then I'm going to cut a triangle like so. And I'm going to cut a triangle like so. I'm not even giving you measurements because I'm just kind of winging it and eyeballing it, and I'm going to make this one bigger than that one in approximately the same size. And so what I'm going to do here, because that's clearly not a triangle, is I'm going to just make it one, which also gives me another one. Bonus! Right, cut the same on this side. And you'll see why I'm doing this just now. Then you can take something like, okay, this is my water jar, so I can't turn it upside down, but you can take a whole lot of different round things and trace around them. For the point of saving time, I'm just going to use some punches. I happen to have some different size punches because I'm a crafter, not just an artist. And I'm going to punch out some different size circles. Where's my gray? And we want a little guy. So you can see I'm going for very varied sizes. I hope that one fits because I'm not looking. Yay! Perfect. Okay, this one's probably a little bit too close to that one. So now I want a bigger circle. Sorry, I'm just scratching in all my toys that are behind me, and I'm going to totally cheat. I have a die cutting machine, so I can die cut. Oh, coffee, thank you. Cheers, people. So I'm just going to die cut. Whoops. Let's see what fits. Let's have a really nice big circle. That will fit on those, and then that will fit on that one. Okay, so let's go with I'm just going to die cut in the background that you can't see because I can't move this machine, it's huge. So what I'm doing is I am prepping, and I just realized I didn't put my one plate down. So what I'm doing is I'm just prepping a whole lot of different shapes in real basic shapes. Okay, so if those of you who know Kandinsky and the Distale, which is Dutch, the Distale period, the Distale art movement, these guys worked with shapes and forms to create different compositions. And so I'm going to show you, because I have some people who, and as I've taught art over the years, so here's my nice circles, and I need one in the darker gray. Let's see, let's have the same size. Yes, that'll fit. And let's see if I've got any more space. Will that fit? Nope. Let's go one size smaller. That'll fit. So I've had a few people over the years who've said they want to do modern art, and they've had a look at things, books, or when online research became a thing, and they can't understand why the artwork that they saw. Oops, that one's like an apple. It's got a piece out. My piece of paper moved. They can't understand why it's so expensive in the galleries. They can paint it themselves. So I've had a few people come and join me over the years because they wanted to be able to paint their own modern arts. Yeah, cheap. And only when they actually get going do they realize how difficult it is, because it looks so simple. It's just a splash of paint here and a line there and yeah, some color in the background. Anybody can do that. Well, until you actually start doing it yourself, it's not as easy as you think. So it's a bit of a reject, but I quite like that shape. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting my shapes into color families. So I've got my number 5 gray, which is my mid-tone gray. I've got, I don't know what, it's right down to black. I can't remember what color black was, number. So I'm going to pop those over there. And I'm going to go back to working on my matte, which is a bit more neutral in tone. Not that it matters today about getting dirty, because I probably won't get to using paint today. Okay, so we've got our little piles of color going on over there, and we've got our, let's just make sure that I am in shot. Okay, you can see me, yes. So we have a square canvas, and we have your traditional A4 canvas. And when you are working with composition, it is important to remember that your background, which is why I've left this one white, and I'm not really working with white as any of my objects, your background is also an object. People tend to forget about their background. And so when you are actually constructing, or whether it's a image of an object or a modern art, you need to remember that your background is as important as your subject. And when we are working with these colors, so in this case the black is very, very strong, so it's going to have a heavy presence in your layout, and your pale colors are not going to be as in your face. And something that I have said all the way along is that your light colors are going to jump forward at you, and your dark colors are going to recede. So if I'm to start building a construction over here, if I put a black object down that is very strong in contrast to the rest of my page, I will intentionally place it in, so there's the 2/3 rule that you've heard me mention before. You have you can divide your canvas into thirds this way or into thirds that way, and you can either use the same amount of what I call airspace, or in this case background, around there, or you can intentionally give it more there than there. That's going to change the feeling of the whole image, whether you have even space or uneven space. It changes the tension of the way the viewer views the object. And it sounds, I mean, it's such a simple little thing, but it does change. It changes the whole construct of your object and your subject. So this being your subject. Then if you're going to build things in front of it, so there's various ways you can do it. You can either just have your objects in the page and not touching. So you can create tension in just by using simple techniques. So by not touching, is that interesting? Have I got the same amount of, so if I make this have the same amount of airspace there, and then between my objects visually try and have the same amount of airspace there and there, that has one sort of feeling. Or if I intentionally bring it closer, not quite touching, is that that has a different feeling. If I overlap my objects, that changes the whole thing again. So how you place your objects on your canvas, how you place them in your design, changes completely how the whole picture feels. So at the moment we've now gone from having where your objects take up quite a lot of space and your background is kind of evenly distributed almost, to just changing by overlapping like that. Your object suddenly becomes the 1/3 and your background the 2/3, and by suspending it up in the air you're giving it a little bit more tension than if I had to turn this round. So just a simple thing. Sometimes if you're working on something and it's just not working, and it's not an image where it's like a landscape with, in fact we've done that where we've had ground and sea and sky, and I was working with a chap called Brian, and Brian was trying desperately not to paint anything with water, and he used to like to work out of his head, so it was quite difficult to guide him because I didn't have any reference to what he was seeing in his mind's eye. And so the one picture he was painting, it just wasn't working and he wasn't happy, and I couldn't really guide him, as I said, because I didn't have any reference. And I said to him, you know what, looking at your painting as somebody who has no idea what you have in your mind's eye, as a constructive way to look at your painting, it has more weight at the bottom. So your darker colors you had at the top, and it's just not working. He had his sky quite dark and dramatic, but actually it wasn't really working as a sky. It was too heavy at the top, and we turned his canvas upside down, and with a few tweaks and changes it unfortunately became yet another water scene because the sky had been blue, but it worked. So if you're struggling with something, just turn it upside down. Sometimes that changes your whole perspective. Or you can go vertical, and vertical with it in the air up there, or vertical with your object down here and weighted in the bottom. Which feels more comfortable to you? So these are just simple hints, tips and tricks to play with when you are working with just where you're going to put your object on the page. And I have put the lightest object in front. I have put this medium thing behind my dark thing just to play with a little bit of tension, because traditionally your darkest object would be at the back. And these are the kind of things. So what we can even do is, let's go to playing with something like a triangle. This is quite a harsh, angular, angry, not angry, but it's an uncomfortable shape. A circle is comfortable. A square is kind of comfortable. A triangle is not a comfortable shape. And it's so you can create tension by having, for example, a triangle like this with a little circle like that, just touching. And you can create that tension because, okay, so you've created something that looks like that could be falling down, and depending on where you put your circle, it's going to have a different tension. If you put it right on the top, it's going to have a different feeling to if you put it like it's just about to fall. So it creating a modern art and creating your image is a whole lot more complicated than just slapping things down on a page. Yes, some people do it naturally and some people do it instinctively, but this is just a fun exercise for you to be able to do at home, to experiment with what works. I mean, you could even change it up completely by having your circle inside your object. Are you going to have it in the middle of that space? Are you going to have it up there? Are you going to bring it down to the bottom? Are you going to bring another object into the space? And are you going to have it touching your edge of your canvas and your object? That creates a whole different background and a whole different tension. Are you going to make it so that this becomes a diamond? And that becomes something else. You can take the same thing and work it on a different size canvas, and immediately, because this is now almost the same size as your canvas, it is going to change completely how your objects look on the page. Are you going to make this one have equal airspace around there? Are you going to have this one touching there and there? So, and at the moment I've just been playing with 2 or 3 objects. The more objects you bring into your composition, the more complicated it becomes. So you could have a triangle within a triangle. If you have, so they're almost the same, just pretend that we have the same airspace there. And you could build on your shapes. So that is just a subtle change of color. That is a strong change of color. And this is just for you to experiment with at home and learn and play and just see what effects you can create. You might discover that you're somebody who likes to have everything equal and even. And that works for you. You like the balance. You like, so it's easy to create something based on this. Once you're happy with your construction, you can then move on to playing with perhaps changing these into colors. So start with something simple. There is so much more to art than what meets the eye. So walking into a gallery and looking at something and going, oh, I can do that. Try going home and actually reconstructing something and see if it comes naturally or if you have to actually work on it. There is so much research one can do into composition, into colors, into what comes forward, what goes back. And then we can go into like product. So at the moment I'm just working with pieces of paper, but you'd get different qualities of paint. You get translucent paint. So are you going to see your layers through each other? You get opaque paint. Are you going, which is like working with paper where one will block out the other. Are you going to work with shiny and matte? So shiny objects are going to catch the light and change the way they look. There is so much to think about when one is constructing a painting or a modern art. So that's what I wanted to just discuss with you today. It's a lot of technical stuff, but that is what is important. People often say to me, but you make it look so easy. You just do it and it works. And I'm trying to give you a little bit of insight as to what is in my head, what I know, and the tools. So this is a tool. I'm using this tool in my head when I am working with my objects, for example, of placing them. And yes, this is square, but it's also got dimension, and that is round and that is tall. So when I am planning, this could be a jug, this could be my vase, and this could be, I don't know, a little pretty box on my desk. When I'm creating the layout to be able to either photograph or draw from real life, I am using all these examples, just they now become 3D. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that has helped. And yeah, give this a try. It's not difficult to do. You can create your own either pieces of paper if you've got colored paper at home, or you can paint different sheets of paper and cardboard. It could be breakfast cereal boxes. It doesn't have to be fancy paper. It doesn't have to be fancy anything. You could use your Amazon delivery boxes, shoe boxes, whatever. But paint, get hold, you can do it in colors. So I've just worked with black and white and gray because that's a good starting point. So you can do it with the grays, but then start playing with different colors. Play with your opposite colors, so opposite or complementary, so yellows and purples, different tints and tones of yellows and purples, greens and reds, different tints and tones. Your reds will go pink, and different tints and tones of oranges and blues, and play with those as color combinations. So there's so much you can play and experiment with without even trying to do a full-on still life, and you will learn so much just by doing that. I hope you enjoyed that session. I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but that was today's session. There won't be a session tomorrow. Tomorrow is a public holiday, so here in Berlin, it's a public holiday for quite a few places around the world. It's May Day, it's Workers' Day. So I will have, my husband won't be working, so I won't be streaming tomorrow. I will see you guys next week on Tuesday and Thursday. I'm cutting down my streaming time. I will be doing craft on Tuesday and art on Thursday. See you next week. Bye guys. Have a good weekend.